keep in mind that in any given year, they can change up the interview style. That is very important to understand because I think it's a false sense of comfort to rely on historically what the interview style is like, although that is definitely something I encourage you to find out because there's also a good chance that you could be better prepared for that very reason. But I guess don't allow yourself not to expand and to be ready for anything.
Hey, future CRNA, welcome to the CSBA podcast. CSBA has helped over 3,000 nurses like you gain acceptance into schools across the country. Tune in for inspiration and actionable takeaways to help you from start to finish.
Hello, future CRNA. Welcome back to the show. Today, we're going to reveal what are some trends in 2024 in regards to the CRNA interview. So what are some things that I'm commonly seeing come up as far as style of interview? And if you stay to the end, I'm going to uncover 10 common interview questions, and I'm going to give you a special offer to get a free download, but you have to stay all the way to the end. So be sure to tune in. Now let's get into the show. Hi, future CRNA. Welcome back to CSBA podcast. So I wanted to have this episode to kind of discuss some of the common trends that I am seeing in the CRNA interview style process. I will lead with the one thing that I'm seeing as a common trend is some type of personality testing, emotional intelligence testing. Two of the more common ways that they do this are through platforms such as Casper, which is with a C, C-A-S-P-E-R, Casper, and then the Kira, I think it's K-I-R-A exam. Both of these are emotional intelligence style tests that you have to take. It's not actually on your interview day. It's usually something you have to do when you're selected to interview. And some schools use this almost as a pre-screening tool to even get an in-person interview. So that is definitely a trend that I'm seeing. I also know schools that are not using these to outsource kind of company-based EI test platforms, sometimes even make their own, meaning they have their own EI exam they administer either during the interview or before the interview. So again, something definitely is a common trend. So be sure to be brushing up on your EI. Even programs who historically have clinically based interviews, I have again seen the trend going towards doing some type of EI evaluation. So in order to be sure that you're prepared, it's always best to make sure you are investing in yourself to grow in your own EI. Be sure to talk to current students who have recently interviewed, but also keep in mind that in any given year, they can change up the interview style. That is very important to understand because I think it's a false sense of comfort to rely on historically what the interview style is like, although that is definitely something I encourage you to find out because there's also a good chance that you could, be better prepared for that very reason. But I guess don't allow yourself not to expand and to be ready for anything because again, they could widen their horizons this year where maybe the student who just interviewed last year said, this is the style. And then you go in there and you're like, well, that was not expected. So it's always best to prepare for both EI and clinical-based type of interview when going into your CRNA interview season. And I will also give you a pro tip to make sure you start the interview preparation at least, and I'm serious, at least 6 months prior to your anticipated interview, not your actual interview, because you may not know. I often see candidates make this giant mistake and they don't start preparing for the interview until after they submit their application, or gosh forbid, after they get the invite to come interview and they're panicking and freaking out because sometimes you don't have much of a notice. I've known students who have less than a 24-hour notice to interview. So don't let that happen to you. All right, moving on. Next trend that I'm noticing is a multi-day interview. So I've seen CRNA schools kind of break up the interview process into multiple days, like a couple days, potentially like on a Saturday or Sunday, on a Friday, Saturday, or, midweek. So again, it just depends. But again, I've seen them break it up into more than one day. Now, sometimes some of those days may include current students, which is also kind of a trend I'm seeing where maybe one of the days is an information session, meet like the current students that are going to the school. And it's really designed to help inform you of the decision you're getting ready to make as far as picking the school, and helps answers any questions you may not even know you have about the program. But it also gives you a chance to talk to current students and kind of understand, a little bit more about the program that's maybe a little more personalized. And it also is a way for them to have their current students kind of give them any heads up or red flags. I will, not to make you paranoid, but they do talk to the current students after the mix and mingle and ask for their feedback. And it's not like they are the decision makers, but if they had any major red flags or any conversations that kind of were like, ooh, that's not good, they may tip the faculty on that, and it may come up in your interview, or it may just be documented. And so I guess I just want to make sure that you're aware that that is part of the interview process. And I think you also don't want to be so shy and quiet that you're not saying a peep, because it is a great opportunity to vocalize your interest in pursuing this career path and why. And so I think it's just an opportunity to be friendly and show why you'd be a great team player and a really great cohort member for the upcoming class. So keep that in mind when you have a mix and mingle session with current students. And also for the information day, be sure you bring a notepad and paper and take a lot of notes, because the last thing you want to do at the end of your actual interview, when they say, do you have any questions for us, is to ask a question they know for a fact that they just told you the day before. Do what you can to make sure you're remembering everything. I mean, they even have little pocket recorders that you could even bring with you if you're fearful that you won't remember everything they shared with you. But this is also why it's really helpful to attend multiple open houses prior to applying, because you should have a very good handle on the information they will share with you prior to your interview day, so you don't end up asking a question that was clearly stated prior to your interview. All right, next is virtual and in person, or one or the other. Some schools, since, the glory days of, the dark days, I don't know if they're glory days, they were dark. Let's just put it that way. The C word. Since that occurred, some schools have maintained the optionality to have virtual interviews. And I think this is great, because a lot of students who are applying out of state, it was very expensive just to go in for an interview. So it definitely has opened the doors to allow the interview process to be a lot more cost effective and time sensitive if you don't have time off work, to take a 2-day trip to go interview. So I do think that's a great thing that came out of it. But I will say, if you have to pick between a virtual and in-person interview, and if you can do the in-person interview, I really think that's the way you need to go. I have heard multiple times from people that the virtual interview sometimes just misses the mark, meaning you don't really get a chance to display as much as you can personally as you could as an in-person experience. It can even be a struggle to make eye contact on camera, because you don't know where to look. I mean, I've been podcasting for a long time, and I still struggle with where should I look at the camera, and it's hard to do. And so I do encourage you to, if you have an optionality to pick an in-person, that is what you choose. But if it's not an option for you, don't be fearful. Do the virtual, but make sure you're prepared for a virtual interview. Check your audio, check your lighting, make sure your background is, relatively discreet and plain and simple. Asked about it. Like, for example, I have propofol Stevo rock in my background. They'd probably quiz me on those drugs because it's in my background. I also just moved offices and I don't have a door, so it's very lousy and our kids are home. I would not do this if this was a CRNA school interview. I'm sorry you guys get it now in the podcast, but I got a podcast and I got to move on. The kids are home and they're sick, and it is what it is. But that being said, I would make sure that, again, if you have dogs or the mailman may come knock on your door, that you figure out a way to make sure you're in a quiet environment so there's no distractions and things of that nature. I know I've shared this before, and I'll share it again because it just still makes me kind of laugh a little bit. But back, I did a mock interview several years ago now, and this person had a dog and they started barking, and instinctively they let out a curse word, because it was just like a natural knee-jerk reaction. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if that had happened in an actual CRNA school interview, that'd be really hard to recover from. So if you have a dog, if you have a cat that may jump in front of the camera, just put them in a different room. Make sure they're not going to be interfering with your big day. Because that's the downside of a virtual interview, is you don't have as much control over things like that versus going in person. But yeah, I think a mistake I see people often make is when they have the choice, they pick virtual because it's more convenient. But I don't really know if that's really the best option for most. I think it's an option for those who don't really have a choice otherwise, or who feel very confident in the fact that they feel good about a virtual interview. But I still think being able to shake hands and meet someone in person is just the way to go. We are humans. We like physical connection. And so I think that should be what you aim to do if possible. Some schools will have both automatically, though. Some will just say that we do our first interview virtual, and then the second interview, if you pass the first interview, you come in person, or they might just have both. So it may not be a choice. It may just be, this is how we do it. But I wanted to give you the heads up that if you had a choice, also, if you have a choice, pick first thing in the morning or first thing in the day. Don't be the last interviewer that day if you can, because they're fatigued. They're humans. They're not AI bots just yet, but they might be someday. So if you have a preference on the first day, if they're doing interviews for a whole solid week, for example, go in as soon as you can. Don't wait till the very last day, the very last time slot, because A, they might be fatigued and tired, and B, they've already just seen a slew of other candidates that they're now comparing you to. So be one of the first if you have the choice. The next trend that I'm seeing is schools, like I kind of spoke to this earlier, who historically did clinical interviews are now blending both EI and clinical. And they may do this by having separate rooms set up. Maybe they have like 3 rooms, for example, set up, and maybe one room is EI, one room is clinical, another one is just kind of a blend of both, or get to know you kind of questions. So I have seen this become more common. So again, or schools that maybe historically did clinical, now instead of just doing clinical, they maybe do mostly EI questions and give you a CCRN style test to take to kind of test your clinical knowledge. So that is also something I'm seeing too, that maybe they don't ask clinical questions anymore, but they do still test you on your clinical knowledge with a written exam. I've also seen schools do on-the-spot essays, or if they're not on the spot, I've seen them have them ask you to write an essay to submit for your interview day. And they might give you a prompt and give you a page requirement, and then just say, you have 2 days to do it. There you go, and submit it on. And then, so that is something that I'm also seeing. And again, I think it's because with AI, you guys, it's really hard for these schools to know your writing ability for your essays. I mean, they don't want to see you struggle in school. And with the amount of resources that are now available to have you critique your essay and use AI to write your essay, which I don't recommend. I recommend you do it for brainstorming. And if you have anything major to get some ideas, but I still think you should write your own essay. It is pretty easy now to have AI detecting tools that kind of can detect whether AI was used. I don't know the accuracy of these tools, but at the same time, sometimes it's pretty obvious when AI was used because it doesn't even sound like a human would write it. So be very, very careful with that. But it's a tool, and it's a tool that could help you if you're having a mental freeze or a roadblock. But I still advise you at the end of the day to make sure that it's in your own writing, that you don't use AI to write your whole essay. That would be a huge mistake, in my opinion, especially the fact that they have AI detecting tools now to kind of help educators decipher whether something has been written by AI. You want to be really careful with that. But that's also partially why sometimes these schools are having on-the-spot essays, or they're asking for some other type of written work other than your personal statement, because they want to see if you can actually write, because they, again, don't want you to struggle with all the writing you're going to be doing in school. And then last but not least, and again, I mentioned this earlier too, but was the student mix and mingle. I'm seeing this to become a more common experience where they ask, certain students from their cohorts, maybe it's one cohort, two cohorts, to come and have kind of an information session with the interviewees or the applicants. And again, this is geared to be part of the interview. So don't take it as just, oh, cool, I get to ask all kinds of nitty-gritty questions and pick their brain. You can do that, but just be careful that you're not, still treat it like it's an interview process. Still make it formal, still be very polite, very professional. You just don't want to, get too crazy with it, because again, they could be asking for feedback from these students on the applicants. And I'd hate for you to say something that could jeopardize your success just because you were taking it too casually. So that is the sum of the new kind of styles that I have been seeing come up from CRNA school interviews. And then, of course, I did promise interview questions. Everyone loves interview questions. And I will make sure that you have a link to grab your study guide here. I made a study guide for clinical-based CRNA questions. If you're a part of CSBA, which I highly encourage you to take advantage of all that we offer, And we do offer an EI-based clinical interview study guide. And with the guidance of, obviously you don't want to take anything I say, but it's just to help you kind of get the wheels in motion, get you thinking about how you can apply this to your situations. So we all have strengths. We all have weaknesses. Some people's strengths are clinical. Some of them maybe not so strong in the EI realm or thinking through those types of EI questions. Others are very strong in EI and thinking through those types of questions. And while others maybe are weaker at clinical knowledge. So again, being a part of CSBA, we do help you through both of those and coach you on that. Our goal and our mission is to help you grow, help you advance your knowledge, help you learn. And so again, that is what we're out to do. But I will go ahead and drop the link for the CRNA interview study guide. It's clinical based. And just to give you some ideas on what is in the study guide, a common trend that we're seeing in CRNA school interviews is ACLS based questions. For example, ventricular tachycardia, VTAC, and management of a patient with a pulse, knowing the process you would follow to treat that. Every time I say that word, I think of social media now. So next one would be mechanism of action of norepinephrine and shock management. Why would you pick norepi over phenylephrine, for example? Could be an interview question. All right, let's move on some more. So cardiac's a big one. They do ask a lot of cardiac questions. Understanding, SVR and the various types of shock, meaning cardiogenic shock, hypovolemic shock, septic shock, distributive shock, knowing how SVR specifically is affected in those shock states. We're also seeing a lot of pharmacology, knowing all your muscle relaxants like rocuronium, vecuronium, Nimbex, and, the breakdown as far as how they're metabolized, what's the difference between them. Understanding the difference between pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics even, or drugs such as cardine, or even neostigmine. So again, kind of understanding, and I've also known like people asking questions on train of 4 monitoring. So if you have the fact that you use paralytic drips in the ICU, you need to be prepared not only for the actual drug, but train of 4 monitoring as well. Neuro-wise, asking questions about ICP. For example, what is Cushing's triad? And what is the significance of that? Asking things like, how do you calculate ICP? Signs of increased intracranial pressure. Some miscellaneous questions, things such as ventilator modalities. We have 2 ventilator modality workshops inside of CSBA, which are really great. But knowing your ventilator modalities, I know you have RT. I get it. I had one too, but it doesn't replace the fact that you should still understand what it means to be on SIMV, for example, and what PEEP is, right? And how PEEP affects ventilation. So understanding that is really, really important. Like oxygen consumption, understanding, how your body breaks down oxygen. And for example, how do you calculate oxygen consumption in an adult? So the O2 per kilos per minute, and what that is, and then dividing it by your body weight. I'll just tell you right now, it's 250 mLs of O2 a minute divided by 70, like for example, 70 kilograms equals approximately 3.57 mLs of O2 per kilos per minute. So again, having these formulas, I know it's overwhelming to think, oh my gosh, I have to remember this, but these are all things that if you can figure out how to get it into your toolbox, you're going to then utilize it in CRNA school. You're going to be quizzed on it. You're going to be expected to know it. So it's something that's going to serve you later. So you might as well just buckle down and learn it now, because it's going to play in your favor down the road when you're in CRNA school. Really, if you think about the CRNA school interview preparation, even if you know your school is mostly EI questions, any clinical preparation is going to serve you down the road, because when you're in CRNA school, you're going to be learning a whole bunch of clinical knowledge. So the more you prepare now for what that's going to be like, the better off you're going to be once you start your program. Other things that could be tested on are such things as pulmonary wedge pressures and dicrotic notch and what that signals, what that means. Knowing and tracing the blood flow through the heart and lungs, and knowing that pathway and what that looks like, by step-by-step basis. Some programs ask med math. It could be like ratio problems, relatively basic med math. But again, if you're not accustomed to converting mics to milligrams or percentages to milligrams, that could be very overwhelming on the spot. So just brushing up on that knowledge can really, really serve you well in the CRNA interview. All right, so I'm going to drop the study guide in the show notes. So make sure you grab that. And again, if you're part of CSBA, we have ventilator workshops, we have med math, we have it all. So we have over 25 educational workshops inside CSBA. Our goal, again, is to foster professional growth and really help you not only get into school, which, yes, of course, it's like yes, we're going to do it. We're going to get you to school, but I want to make sure you're successful once you start your program. So I appreciate you tuning in today. Wish you luck in your interview. Cheers to your future CRNA. And until next time, take care.
Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to head over to CRNASchoolPrepAcademy.com to gather free resources to help you on your CRNA journey. Stay strong. We're rooting for you, future CRNA.